Okay, let's start off with, I didn't see any minutes in the packet, so let's go to first item on the agenda. I guess we have to call roll, right?
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. Dick Benka. Okay, not here. Ruth Ellen Fitch. She's not here. Jeff Rudolph, you're here.
I'm here today.
Okay. Sergio Modigliani.
Present.
Janet Gelbart. She's usually here. Sadaf Kazmi.
Here.
Mariah Brega. Val, are you going to be sitting in for the school committee? I saw Val here.
Yeah, Val's on. I don't know if she's
Okay. Okay. Is Jesse here for the school committee? Is anyone here for the school committee?
Can Val unmute herself, or is she muted?
she can unmute herself based
Okay.
on the name, but
Okay. Anyway, let's get going.
I don't think we have a quorum, do we?
No, we should. 5 people.
You missed me out again.
Did I not call your name? I'm sorry, John. John Doggett.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, Jeff Rudolph.
We
John
have
Doggett?
5. You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. First item: healthcare benefits with vote on recommendations. Dick, do you want to? Oh, is Dick here?
Dick's not on the call. I don't know.
Carla, can you speak for Dick?
So
No, but she did say he would be joining shortly, so maybe we should shuffle the agenda. He will
Right.
be joining.
Okay.
all right, great. Yeah, because I believe he's planning to be here. So let's wait on that.
Okay. So let's move to the town reports section. Who do we have to do that? John Doggett. So here's Dick. Why don't we? You want to start, or you want to wait for Dick?
He's here now.
I believe this was Janet's agenda item. John and John. I don't know if.
Yeah, I've only just received it, so I'm not in a position to comment on it yet.
So let's go back to Dick. Dick, are you ready to talk about healthcare benefits?
1 minute. I apologize, and let me apologize in advance. I am waiting for a call from an ice dam removal company. We have ice dams, and I left my message with them, and they said that they are backed up, but in case they call, I will have to take that call. So hopefully let me get through what I'm.
When they said they were backed up, that wasn't a pun.
Okay.
Okay.
You give me 1 second here. Okay, good. Thank you very much. And just for the record, I'm Dick Benka, a member of the ENRSC School Subcommittee. And you've all received a copy of the report that was voted by our subcommittee. As we've heard throughout this process, the medical insurance premiums have been identified as a budget buster for the town and the schools. The large table 1 that is part of the packet that you have, and I don't know whether you'd like me to start sharing my screen or whether I can here.
You should be able to.
Okay.
And it would be helpful, I think, if you could talk to the document.
If I could just let you guys know, I'm here sitting with Lincoln in his office because he couldn't get the screen to work in the big room. So just to let you know, we're here and participating.
Would you help me with screen sharing, please?
I will do my best, Dick. I'm not sure if I'm a co-host on this, but I will try.
Is Nicole on?
Nicole is on.
I'm
This
here.
is-
I'm just trying to get
Hello?
the big room in. 1 second.
We're in Lincoln's office because he couldn't turn on
I,
the thing.
because I'm afraid I didn't know, I don't know how to use the D10. I never.
I have just set up the D10. Sorry, everyone.
Oh, okay.
All right. so
Thank you.
We can go to D10. Is that better?
We'll be, yeah, that's better for us.
Okay.
Yes,
We're gonna.
see you in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see it, Dick.
Now the question is, can
Okay.
I move it? Can I move it?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
There's the-
Okay, good. Thank you. The large table 1, which is this table, and I can rotate it. Took the actual fiscal year 26 participation in plans, which Melissa provided to me, and I thank you very much, Melissa, if you are on. And it calculated the premiums that are being paid in total for the health benefits now, looking at each plan, the number of participants in each plan, and then it looks at the town share of the town and school share of those benefits, which in almost all cases is 83% of the premiums being paid. There are a couple of plans that are just 62%, but they are a very, very small number of employees. They're or dependents. Those plans, according to their description on the town website, apply outside of New England or internationally, and there are just very limited participants. As you can see, there
Hey,
two.
Dick, can you scroll down up a little so we can get the heading on the columns?
Sure.
There you go.
Okay. And please let me know what else I can do to make your life easier.
Well, we lost the bottom now. So
Okay.
lost the totals. All right.
So
Anyway.
so the and you probably don't want me to make it smaller, and I won't. This year, the town share and school share of premiums amounted to $39.3 million. That amount will only continue to rise with the projected 12% increase in premiums from year to year. The 83% share of premiums that we are now paying is one of the most generous of the premiums being paid by our comparable communities as identified by the schools. They identified a number of, here we go, a number of our similar communities that they look at for school benchmarking purposes. And you can see a couple of things. The 83% premium is one of the most generous. And also the other communities in a number of cases distinguish between the more expensive HMO plans. For example, looking at Belmont, they pay 80% of HMO plans, only 75% for newly hired employees. They only pay 50% for the PPO plans. So a number of these communities, Acton, Boxborough, Belmont, Arlington, distinguish between the different types of plans, the more expensive plans and the less expensive plans. What this analysis does is to recognize that reducing Brookline's contribution to a level that's in line with similar communities could result in millions of dollars of savings per year, which would reduce the projected deficits permit a smaller override, and increase the likelihood that that override would be palatable to voters. In light of that, the chart on page 3, I can get to that.
Mhm.
The little summary chart on page 3 which is here, shows some of the options. If we covered 78% of HMO plans, but 65% of the PPO plans and the POS plans, and held retirees harmless at 83%, the town and the school cost using fiscal year 26 figures would be 33.7 million rather than 39.3 million, taking our current enrollments, current premiums. That would be a savings using fiscal year 26 numbers of $5.6 million a year. Those savings, however, would be greater in the actual override years of 27, 28, 29, as health insurance costs escalate. They'd reach almost $8 million a year, $7.9 million a year in fiscal year 29, assuming 12% cost increases. If, on the other hand, we did a flat rate and instead of 83%, covered 75% regardless of the plan type, the savings wouldn't be quite as much, but there would still be millions of dollars of savings. Again, holding retirees harmless at 83%, the town and the school cost would be reduced from the 39.3 million to 36.2 million, a saving of $3.1 million a year in using the current numbers, but again, escalating and rising to about $4.4 million in fiscal year 29, one of the out years of the projected override. The view of the subcommittee is that the continued escalation of costs borne by the town and the schools is unsustainable. The resulting override demands could well lead to a failed override. And what we do is we urge the select board to consider setting an override amount calculated on the basis of a reduced employer contribution rate. We recognize that collective bargaining may well be ongoing past the end of this fiscal year. Therefore, in setting the override amount, the select board could assume a reduced town and school contribution rate would result in savings only in the out years, only in fiscal year 28 and 29, and say 1/2 of fiscal year 27 if you had a January 1, 2027 effective date, or only in fiscal year 28 and 29 with a July 1, 27 fiscal year, July 1, 2027 effective date. So those savings and resulting reduction in the forecasted deficits would still be in the millions of dollars. And those numbers are shown on page 4 in text, but largely in footnote. The bottom line that the subcommittee wrestled with is the fact that a failed override serves nobody's interest. So we really urge the select board to consider, we know that this isn't our decision. We recognize that the select board is the one that's going to decide on the override. And we urge them to consider setting an override amount that's calculated on the basis of a reduced employer contribution rate. This is one lever that the select board can pull. It could provide a sustainable target for negotiations rather than accepting an unsustainable situation as a given that we're locked into. And we urge the select board to take this recommendation to heart. So thank you very much.
Great, okay, any discussion?
I
I
have,
guess maybe the first question should be to Chaz, and that is, in the context of collective bargaining, what do we have to give up in order to get this big bonus?
Well, so right now,
Because nothing is free.
that is correct. Right now, we have two major settled contracts that go through FY 27. That's with the police union and the fire union. And we're in negotiations with AFSCME. We have a couple of other smaller unions out there. But really, right, in order for this to change, the calculus really is it needs to be accepted by the schools, by the teachers union. They hold most of the votes, or a plurality of the votes. And it's very difficult to change anything without them. And I think the calculus here, the kind of back of the envelope calculation we have been using is every 1% that you change in the shift is roughly $5 taken out of the average employee's paycheck, withheld from the average employee's paycheck. So the 5% shift you're talking about is $25 a week for the average employee. And using the average plan, et cetera. And that, obviously increases as the cost of the health plans increase. So what the unions are going to want is something that offsets that. So how much of this found money would we be reinvesting in collective bargaining? How much of it would go to, ameliorating those costs? And then there are the costs to the non-union employees, people who cannot collectively bargain, who are on our plans, who would need to be, in some way, those would need to be addressed in some way as well. What I worry about, my principal worry here is that if we put this, I very much agree with the conclusions that the subcommittee has reached here, which is that 8317 is unsustainable and needs to be readdressed. I have said that directly to our bargaining units. I have said it as plainly as I can, that if this doesn't change, eventually the consequences are going to be a failed override at some point and a loss for all of us. So I absolutely agree with that conclusion. My concern here would be in framing it out this way and saying we can reduce the override on the expectation that the unions will go along with it, is that the unions may very well not go along with it, and say, if this is presented to them as a take it or leave it, their answer may well be, right, leave it. You didn't put enough money in the override. We are not obligated to move off of this for any reason. There's no reason why we would move off of it. You're just going to have to make up those gaps elsewhere. And if you make up those gaps in a way that we don't like, for example, by cutting our employees, then you're going to have a floor fight on your hands at town meeting, because we will come in and we will tell them to make the cuts elsewhere. And we'll say, you're killing our teachers, you're killing our firefighters, et cetera, et cetera. Cut the select board budget instead. That's what I worry about, is that if we present this to them as, an ultimatum, that the response is going to be nothing you can say or do will force us to move off of this. So we're just going to sit tight until we hear a proposal that we like from you. And if we don't hear a proposal that we like from you, we'll just take it all the way to town meeting and see what happens. I don't love that risk. The other thing here is, realistically, from a political perspective, the unions are going to be a part of the conversation about whether or not to support an operating override. And if we put something out there where we say, and we're going to ask for these contributions to be increased by employees, I don't know how that's going to impact their decision on whether or not to support that override, to campaign as strongly for that override as they otherwise would. It casts a pall on the proceedings somewhat by putting that, again, I don't think of it as an ultimatum, but that's how I worry they're gonna take it. I would rather us continue to try and negotiate this in good faith and figure out a way to make this work, and utilize the savings from this, to, you know, to ultimately do what is necessary for this, which is increase our overall revenue and reduce our reliance on operating overrides. Janet has her hand up.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't negotiated individually with each of the unions. There's a separate bargaining group under the GIC for this. We are under old rules, like very, very few communities, and I don't know if Anne is on the call. I never followed up with her to ask. The old rules say in order to make any changes, you need to get 51% of this group, which is weighted by each union's participation in it. So your teachers have an outside vote. It's a weighted average, I believe, and it's in our report that the retirees have something like 10% weight. Teachers have an enormous weight, followed by police and fire. None of whom seem to be moved. So it's a very difficult thing. And a lot of the comparable communities came into the GIC afterwards, and their rules for making changes are much different. 14 years ago on that old override study committee, Sean Cronin, who was then the deputy town, I don't know the full title, deputy town administrator, was hopeful that there would be a law passed at the state level that would take this small group of towns out from under the old rules and move them in. That's sort of like, and someday we won't be in Norfolk County anymore. It didn't happen. I've never seen Sean. I've twice seen him crestfallen. That was one of the times. So when you compare to other communities, the question is, what rules do they get to follow? Because the ones that have better deals, I think are under a much more liberal policy. And I never circled back to Anne to ask her, what are the new rules? Because buried in my head is, we need 51%. And if the teachers union represents 60% of the town employees, it's 60% of their vote. And all the way down the line. And I agree with Chaz, even if that weren't the mountain to climb, it's taking an enormous amount of risk that if you ask for less money, that you're pretty sure you're going to have to spend anyway. Because I don't know if past administrations have actually tried to collective bargain on this point with that group. Past administrations said they would, backed off. I'm digging into my memory when I was on the HR subcommittee for advisory. But you know, I don't know what you would have to offer them. When Chaz, and I'm quoting, I think from the budget, from the combined reports in passing the police union contract and the fire union contract, Chaz was very upfront. If we do this, you're going to lose positions. If we do this, we may have to close a company. And their response was, go ahead. So I'm not sure you get them to the table on that. I think maybe, we have to figure out if there's a more compelling reason to offer them, but it's really hard to get someone to vote to take money out of their own pocket. And so I would not be able to vote in favor of this as it stands.
Sergio?
Well, I had a couple of thoughts to introduce, and I'm just talking out loud here, so I'm just sharing some ideas. The first was that Chaz had reminded us of the approximate out-of-pocket cost that these proposals would have on our employees. And, pick the number, I think it was $25 a week. We got 52 weeks, $2,500. If I'm doing my math roughly correctly. And it strikes me that we might want to look and ask ourselves whether it would be less costly to do something of that kind of recompense, and I don't know what the numbers are, in comparison to the kind of escalating costs that Dick has suggested, which seem, I mean, some of them are in 3 years are well over 20 million. And that raises, I think, the second question I wanted to think about with everybody, and that is, I recognize the dangers of a floor fight in town meeting, but I'm wondering whether the scale of the numbers here are such that, to use your example, Chaz, cut the selectmen's budget, okay, maybe that's a few $100,000, but it's not 10 million. And so I'm wondering, what really are there for options in that regard?
You want me to answer that, Bernard? I can.
Pardon me?
Do you want me to answer that, Sergio?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be useful.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the answer there is you kind of go back to the no override, right? You go back to the no override scenarios that have been laid out that are, in our case, are going to be published on Friday, but we've already discussed with the town subcommittee, and we've kind of previewed in the Budget 101 discussions, is that you go back to those numbers and take those as a starting. You're right, the select board's budget is not, I was being somewhat facetious there. The select board's budget is not close enough to cover those kinds of shortfalls. But I think there too, what concerns me about floor fights more generally is that it's an invitation to a more systemic risk. And that ironically, the bigger the numbers get, the less real it seems to people. We saw that, for example, in the fight over the school budget for 2 years ago. This idea that you can just find $1 million and change to put back to restore a world languages program that had already been cut, and that couldn't come back, even if you took $1.5 million and gave it to the school department, it would be impossible for them to restore. That argument didn't gain much traction in town meeting, but we spent a lot of time talking about it. And it was what really worried me about that was that it was a prelude to regular conversations like that, regular conversations about passing an unbalanced budget and, figuring it out in post, figuring it out in the fall. Making cuts not based on the recommendations of the departments that are actually charged with operations, but on the basis of, well, we can't, it's politically unpalatable for us to do this, so we'll have to do something else. That's my concerns there are really that you start to get into this, you start to get into a space that's going to threaten our bond rating, which is, we are where we are because we have strong fiscal control. If we lose that fiscal control, if we start amending the budget on the floor of town meeting, kind of in a reactive way as opposed to in a deliberate way, it's just gonna continue to kind of collapse in. So I think you're right, Sergio, but I also think that, when these numbers are so big, then that encourages people to take big swings at the budget, right? Or worse, pass an unbalanced budget and say, you figure it out.
Well, again, this is for purpose of discussion, and I'm just wondering whether the scale of the numbers are such that there really aren't $5 million budget line items that I believe town meeting would be willing to give up. So that's just my thought. And first of all, I'm not in town meeting anymore. So I may be way out of date. I see others would like to speak, so thank you.
Yeah,
for
John
that chance.
Doggett has his hand up. John, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard. This is a really good piece of work, and thank you very much, Dick, for explaining it so clearly, and the consequences and the comparisons. I think this is exactly the kind of work this committee should be doing, and I think we owe it to the town and to the board to bring it to their attention. And as difficult as it may be to implement, and maybe it's a soft psychological a lever that we're going to throw here, but if we vote for it, and I would be in favor of doing that, by the way, I think we just need to give this topic airing. I mean, by covering it up, as we have done, and not just this item, but many other items, we're at this kind of crossroads where the voters need to decide. Not, and by the way, it's not town meeting, I think, that we're trying to impress. I think we're trying to impress the voters. And if they, for example, if this was on the ballot as part of the initiative and they voted for it in whatever way would be indicative, it would be obviously in a package, then I think the negotiating teams would be under the gun that this is what the residents want. And it's not town meeting that they can lobby for and get their special interests motivated to upset or the budget process. But I think that we would do a service for bringing this to the fore, and I think it needs to be done. Thank you.
Hey, can I just throw in something? The choice is not whether to include Dick's recommendation or not, but maybe the choice is including Dick's recommendation or just the analysis that Dick presented, so that people are very clear of the the issues that we're facing and trying to deal with our budget. Just my thought. Sadaf?
Yeah, so I have a couple things. First is Val is on a work call and will join as soon as she can. Sorry, I was trying to say that earlier. And Mariah is also unavailable, unfortunately, at this time. But I wanted to respond to what John said. I agree with John around giving this topic visibility. I think it's important. It's been discussed many times over. And I understand the complexity around the union negotiations. And I'm obviously not involved in those negotiations, so there's obviously nuance there and a level of complexity. But I think there is benefit in us bringing visibility to the implications around the town financials and the override and the risk that it creates, given the context that we're in right now around a risk to a potential operating override. And I think that visibility and this committee making a statement, and I think we can discuss whether it's modified, certainly, but I think that visibility and bringing that to light, I think is important.
John? John, let's go ahead.
Yeah, for starters, Bernard, I'm never quite sure whether it's appropriate for me to comment during these meetings since I'm just a backup member of the committee. So we don't have a quorum.
Unless someone objects, I think I'd like to hear from you.
Me too.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think this is, as others have already said, it is a core issue. If we're all in agreement that one of the major drivers of our structural deficit, so-called, is the contracts that are agreed to and the terms of those contracts that are in excess of, a growth rate year to year of, let's say, 3%, if you take 2.5 plus new growth. And so every time we do that, every time we agree to another contract of that nature, that's what drives these periodic needs for overrides more than anything else. Not the only thing, but it's the huge factor, personnel costs. So that's number one. Number two is, and Dick has done a terrific job of isolating the health coverage part of that, but it's only one piece, you know, and pension costs that are sort of carrying costs of having this or that employee, you know, on the town's payroll. That's another part. And then the level of the pay under the contract, the cost of living increase, plus any other increases, steps, et cetera. That's another part of it. And in a way, I feel like all of this needs to be bundled and acknowledged, because if our role as a study committee is to make a recommendation for some override amount to be paid from people's pockets, can we honestly say that we think it's a good idea for the town to continue to overextend itself in the contracts it agrees to? I don't feel comfortable making that kind of a recommendation. And yet that is the principal driver underlying every one of these overrides that we periodically have to ask for. So I don't have the answer as to how we address it within the question that is put before voters, or let's say put before town meeting, but I feel we have to address it. The idea that was kind of floating in my head was to make the subject matter of each override the money that stems from whatever aspects of our contracts with our current employees exceeds the amount of revenue we raise through 2.5 plus new growth. And then if the voters say no to, let's say, approval of the current situation in terms of how we deal with healthcare coverage, then it's up to the town administration to deal with that in their next contract negotiation with employees, and in the current under the current contract to deal with how we're going to adjust for the fact that we agreed to a contract that voters just said they don't want to fund the last year of it in terms of its impact on healthcare costs. I think I've said enough for the time being.
Janet has her hand up.
I'm sorry, who has their hand up?
Janet.
Janet, okay.
So the other thing that we have talked about many times is looking at total compensation. And if you look at the chart that's on the town side, if you exclude the police and the fire, who have the ability to more or less hold a gun to your head in the negotiations because they can go into arbitration, which we know is more favorable to them, then the town unions have pretty much been within that 3%. There was a year, I think they got 1% because of COVID, and then it went to 4%. The place where, and our employees, according to Ann, are being paid maybe in the middle of the range that our comparable communities are. So she's able to say, but we give you 83% of your health coverage as a way of competing for those same very few bodies, because there are fewer and fewer people who find it attractive to be in government instead of in private. So that's a thing. And we just, in the last override, evened up a little bit those employees who aren't covered by contracts, the middle management level, and that's getting them, as I recall, into the middle. And part of then being able to recruit them is, but we give you this big perk. So you can't look at everything as if it's one big pot. There are 5, I'll say smaller, even though the main AFSCME covers an awful lot of people, but in comparison, you know, you've got a very large teachers union, which has gotten increases over and above, which the voters approved because I'm going back a century, the 2018 override, half of the cost of that on the school side was the contract they had signed. I don't think Chaz went willingly, or the select board, because they're the ones who say what he can negotiate on, went willingly into that fire contract or police contract. And they put options on the table, which are still there if there's no override. So if you make that an even higher thing, that, gee, you know, we're not going to be able to fund your health insurance. We already can't fund your position. I don't know where it goes in terms of being able to staff the level of staff that you need. We're below probably in some places the level of staff that we need. So I'm totally in agreement. It would be wonderful if we could do it. I'm very much opposed to putting the cart before the horse and saying we're only going to put so much money on the table, because it's a really steep hill to climb. And what I'll do is see if I can circle back to Anne and get the answer as to why these other communities have an easier job. I know that it's easier for them under the new rules, but I don't remember what those new rules are. I know our old rules are very, very, very hard.
I just want to quickly chime in, Bernard, if it's okay.
Yes, sure.
I absolutely think that this study is worth discussion at the select board level. I do. Whether or not it comes with the committee's endorsement or not, I think discussing it is critical in terms of the reason, for the reasons that many of you said, John Van Squack, John Doggett. Is, you know, we've got to talk about it. We got to shed light on the situation. We got to make the community aware of this. But I will say to Janet's most recent point in terms of total compensation, we do see a shift in terms of employees. There is just a sea change in how people work, right? It's no longer a situation where we have people who, you know, stay in town service for 30, 40 years. So in some positions, in some roles, we do. But in other cases, you know, people don't stay in their jobs for that long a period of time. And therefore, non-monetary money that is not in their pocket becomes less attractive to them, less real to them. And, you know, certainly in my time in the collective bargaining rooms with the unions, and when I've raised this, the response that I get is our new members in particular don't you know, aren't considering this when they talk about whether or not they're going to work at Brookline. It's not a make or break thing for them. The make or break things are how much money do I take home at the end of the week? What's my commute like? How long is it going to take me to drive in here? Or take the bus or the T? And, you know, what are the, you know, the benefits that I get in terms of, you know, time with my family, time off, things like that. These things are more intangible, even though in reality, they do have an impact on take home pay. They do have an impact on how much, you know, money your total salary and how much is withheld and all of that. But the bottom line is really where employees are looking. And that means on the one hand, all right, if this is not such a great deal to people, then maybe it matters less if we lower that number. But then it goes back to this issue of, well, how much more money are you taking out of my paycheck? What am I getting for it? And so I do think it's absolutely worth having the conversation. And I will say that the PEC is going to be, the larger group is going to be meeting again in March. I am putting proposals on the table about how to move this away from 8317. But it's going to require, it's going to require, I think, a different sort of conversation about what that means in terms of offsets and balancing things out in order to get the buy-in necessary from the bargaining teams and ultimately bring this successfully to a conclusion.
Okay, Dick, do you want to have any
Sure,
words
thank
of
you.
wisdom?
Thank you. I think I'd like to make 2 points. Number one, we should not, the whole thrust behind this is that we should not be proceeding on the assumption that the 8317 is a given, because if that's the case, then the discussion is not one that is going to move the needle going forward. And the purpose behind this was to encourage the select board to give some serious thought to that question and to the long-term implications of it. The other point is that looking at I think it was the December 18th presentation that was made by Melissa, I may have the date wrong. Property taxes next year without any override are going to go up by 5.1%. There's the 2.5%. There is some new growth in there. There's going to be I think some additional impact from debt exclusions, but the total number of the property tax increase was 5.1%. If you start building an override on top of that, you really have to give some serious thought to, we have to give some serious thought to what will be palatable, what will be acceptable, what will just cause the entire override to fail because the number becomes so daunting. We're not just talking, if you're talking, you can't just talk an 8% override, for example, you're then talking a 13% potential tax increase. And I would very seriously urge the select board to consider that issue. So thank you.
So based on the conversation in the room, I'd be interested in understanding whether there's an alternative proposal around the recommendation. Obviously, Dick shared what we discussed within the school subcommittee. I think there's agreement that it's important to surface. Is there an alternative framing of this that people who are not comfortable with the recommendation as it stands would like to propose that the committee can then discuss and therefore see if we can come to an agreement collectively as a group on what we would put forward as a recommendation?
Well, as I said, I think as it's phrased now, it's putting the cart before the horse. I absolutely agree with Dick. We are on very thin ice, given the amount of money that taxpayers are going to have to come up with in 1 year. We're on that thin ice just looking at Chaz's proposal, and I still don't know, although I understand the PSB budget book is online now. I've been given a link to it. I understand it's down a lot from where it started, but you know, if we're at 5% doing nothing, and Chaz is at, I don't know what your 5.3 million comes to in terms of percent. It's going to be very hard. I hear that from seniors all the time. We can't afford this. And it's set up a school, town, you know, the two big nexuses of population almost in opposition to each other. And that's just not healthy. So I can't offhand think of a way to phrase it because yes, it needs to be surfaced. Yes, they need to understand it. It needs to be negotiated in a way that the response isn't what the town got from the fire department and the police department of basically we don't care. But that's a very much longer. So we need to surface the issue. I've had people ask me about it. What's with health insurance and why do we have to have the 83%? And as soon as I explain, this is how we got there, they understand it. How to put it in a recommendation to the select board, I think they've heard it. I would assume they've been struggling with it because I've heard Melissa talk about it for years and years and years and years. And in our report, it gives the year that it went from 4 or 5% a year increase to the levels we're seeing now. But everyone understands the levels we're seeing now because they're seeing it in their own pockets. Because that's what happened to my rates under Medicare. And that's what happened to my child who suddenly, and there's also churn. You don't know who you're covering because you don't know when the single employee is going to get married. Somebody is going to suddenly age out of their parents' coverage. So there's always that churn as well. So I don't know the answer to how you phrase it. that says this is important and we have to deal with it. But I don't think that we can deal with it by saying, we're just not going to include money for something we know that we're going to have to pay for, at least in the short term. Because I don't think January or next year is enough time to get through this. And I'll let Chaz, who's been at the table, say what he thinks is a reasonable amount of time, because I've never done these negotiations, so I don't know how long they take. I know fire and police and even teachers have taken longer than a year after the expiration of their contract.
Sergio, I'm sorry, Jazz.
No,
you have a question to Jazz?
yeah, that's a delicate kind of question about where negotiations are, how they go and so forth. It varies. I will say that the town number is around 1.6% the current
Okay.
levy. So 5.31 property tax levy for last year, for this current fiscal year is $332.5 million, I think. That's all right. Like, yeah. So it's 1.59% of the current year levy.
So
Okay,
I was
Sergio,
going to make the suggestion to put up on screen share Dick's report, which I was going to do if you will allow me to do that, with the goal of looking at the recommendation. And specifically, he's got 4 points. Sorry, I'm having a technical problem here.
Yeah, you're not centered.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Here we go. So there are the 4 bullets. I don't think, I haven't heard anyone suggest that the first 3 are not right. And so the only one that perhaps is the controversial one is the 4th bullet. So the first question is that an accurate view of the committee's stance?
first 3 bullets?
The first 3,
Right.
are there any concerns about those 3, which read to me as facts? So the recommendation comes in the 4th one, which is suggesting something to the select board. And I'm trying to move us forward, sort of Sadat's question of what are we actually going to do here? And whether what's involved is an edit to the 4th bullet rather than.
So I think there's an issue with the 3rd bullet, because it's that issue of, are we talking about equivalence and the rules that comparable communities are playing under? The way it's been phrased in the budget book has been, we're an outlier. The numbers that I saw from Anne when I asked her, do we have the comps? Some of them are higher, some of them are lower, and I didn't dig in the way Dick did, because I've sort of accepted there are some things in life you cannot fight, like death and taxes. So I'm just trying to read it. I'm going to get closer to the screen while you guys continue to talk about maybe the 4th bullet.
John, you have comment?
Yeah, if I may just add one more question, actually. I heard mention of, Melissa gave out a figure of, I think it was 5.1%, that is baked in for next year absent any override. And I really think that we could do that not just for next year, but for the year after that and the year after that and several years after that, because of the fact that we know that we're going to take 2.5. I mean, we've never not taken 2.5. And then we know over and above that, we have the override, we have the debt exclusion number to add. So we should be able to at least forecast for a few years what the base of our already predictable ask for a tax increase is going to be. Maybe it's not 5.1 every year, but maybe it's 4.5 every year for the next 3 years, and maybe for the next 10 years. I haven't looked lately at how the debt exclusion stretches out. So I don't see how we can ignore that those numbers are knowable And also, I think if they're knowable, I think we should publish them and let it be, people prepare in advance for what it means to put an override on top of the already knowable number.
Okay, Sergio, you still have your hand up?
No, I
Oh,
do not.
I have, in looking at that third bullet, I would just stop it before the second clause referring to the override. Just
Look,
that,
guys, let me just raise the following. Janet, you feel that you need to go speak with Ann Braga, so maybe we should just take this entire thing off the table and move on to something that we can act on.
well, no, I said, if you're talking about how to move it, I had raised a question about the third bullet that I was telling you, this is what I would do with it. I'm not sure how that's not moving it forward. And I did raise my hand.
okay.
Could we put it on the
It
agenda
sounds
for the
like
next
that's not
meeting?
that's not something that people want to consider. Is that right?
Say
Dick,
that
you have your
again,
hand.
please.
Pardon me?
I didn't hear what you said, Bernard.
I mean, by the silence, it sounds like people didn't like Janet's idea.
Well, look, my own position is that I like it the way it's written, but I'm perfectly open to suggestions that might reflect the opinion of others with the goal of getting a stronger vote. And that was why I was offering the idea that Janet might wish to surface additional confirmation about certain things. I'm very much in the camp of John Doggett, that this is information that has to be known to the voters, and I can think of no other way than making it known except putting it in the report. So if it goes in the report as nothing but that and has no recommendations with it, it doesn't seem quite as if we've done our job. That's all. And I'll leave it at that. I see Dick would
Yeah,
like to speak.
I would suggest that Chaz's warning about that recommendation should be a factor to be considered also. Dick?
Yeah, I will say that the subcommittee wrestled with the issue of what the recommendation would be. I don't think the first three bullets are controversial in my view. In fact, I think they could be expanded and additional numbers put in there, but that are in the report. But with regard to the fourth bullet, we wrestled with the language and ended up by simply saying the select board should consider doing something. And we're not ordering them to do anything. We're not saying it has to happen. We're just making a suggestion that they should consider. And that was the language that we settled on to try to soften, I guess, or mitigate the impact of the recommendation. And you all on the select board are the ultimate deciders, as one of our former presidents said, and that's simply a suggestion from us.
Right.
We're not ordering anything, not compelling anything, just saying, think about this.
Yeah, got it.
So I'm, if I may, I'm going to move the report as written.
Okay. So moved. Let's, are we ready to take a vote, or do people want to?
Well, first of all, I need a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, hearing no indication of people wanting to comment, why don't we vote? Let's see, let me find the list of people. Dick Benka,
Yes.
Ruth Ellen Fitch is not here. Jeff Rudolph,
Yes.
Sergio Montigliani,
Yes.
Janet Gelbart,
No,
Sadaf Cosme.
Yes.
Is Mariah here? think she is, yeah.
I'm here, but I'm not a voting person, right?
Oh, I'm
Because-
sorry. That's
Yeah.
right. John Doggart.
Yes.
Okay. That is, I think 6 or so to 1. And the non-voting people will abstain if we even need to indicate that. Okay, let's move on to the next item. And I guess I'd like to emphasize what I think Dick emphasized, and that is that this is just a suggestion to the select board.
Bernard,
Anyway,
I need to go to my next work meeting. I'll try and join at 3:30.
Okay,
But I'm
thanks,
leaving.
Mariah.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Town report sections, Janet, are you ready for that?
If someone can put it on screen. Basically, I was asked to share what we've done so far as a subcommittee. And so, the outline I provided last week was the topic headings of the sections of our report. The sections that are, that were circulated this time are what I consider completed in that we've discussed them, reviewed them, amended them within the subcommittee. We have taken no votes. And I would say essentially our report is what used to be in the style of advisory committee reports. I know they amended how they do their reports, but they always started out with background and discussion. And that's basically what this is. These are the issues we've looked at. These are the things that it raises, but we've reached no conclusions. We've just started to get Chaz's recommendations, started to look at them, ask for some additional information last week. We'll continue that discussion in the next couple of weeks.
So Janet, are you looking for the broader group to review and provide feedback at this point, or are you still, I think you said that the committee hasn't, your subcommittee hasn't voted on this yet. So I assume you'll continue to go that process, go through
So-
that process. And so it's not ready for this committee necessarily to review and provide feedback. Is that accurate?
Request I got from you and or Sergio, I don't remember, when you weren't able to reach Jesse last week. And so I gave you what we have. We haven't voted. If you guys take a look at it and have things you want us to consider, that would be good, but I don't think, I'm not sure what a real discussion at this point would do. As I said, it's not conclusions, it's not recommendations. These are the things we think are salient points from the town side, and some of it more overriding the definitional stuff. If we're putting an override before the voters, these are the issues on the town side. These are the pressures that have been pushing costs up. These are the places that maybe we can find some savings. That part might be in this version of the report. As I said, I was asked, can we see what you guys have done? So there it is.
Sergio?
First of all, Janet, thank you. I think it was very helpful for us to be able to see where you guys are and the progress that you're making. And you're carrying obviously a significant burden here in an effort to explain, I think, to the voters where things are. With that said, I would like to just offer one thought, which is that in my own view, much of what you have now is actually found in the town administrator's write-up.
This is correct.
And I'm sorry?
I said this is correct.
And so I wanted to raise as a thought for your subcommittee to consider, which is simply the value, I think, of what you guys bring is whatever you may see where you are not in agreement or doubly in agreement to that underlying message, and to perhaps help highlight what the work that you've done independently of the town administrator and his team, and how to surface that information for the reader of your document. That's just my thought.
So
you.
basically, in my mind, a lot of that is the part we haven't gotten to yet.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. And if that's the case,
How we
my
got
comments
where we are
withdrawn.
for the most part, and we're now dealing with Chaz as to what he's proposing and what we think of that.
I get it. Thank you.
But John and John are here, they can throw in their thoughts.
John or John, have any thoughts? John Dogger?
Well,
Thank you.
John, you want to start? John D, you want to start or?
No, you go ahead, John.
Well, I was not expecting Sergio to say what he said, and I appreciate that, Sergio. It's a good point to make, as to, and this has been on my mind since the beginning. What really is our assignment? You know, is our assignment to explain to people why we need this money, or is it to say this is why we need this money according to the numbers that we're getting from, administration? And here's why we think some part of it, or maybe all of it, or none of it, should be put into an override question. And I lean more towards the latter, which means I lean more towards, the less that we simply repeat the information and rather take as a given the information we're given by administration. I take it as a given. And the more that we can sort of say, what are we to make of this, the better. I just think that latter course is going to be more helpful.
I thought that's what I was saying.
Yeah, that is what you're saying. So I'm agreeing with you.
But I think part of this, we don't have our primary author here, which was Jesse. And I think for Jesse, that exercise that he went through was very important, I think, and necessary in a way for him to perhaps better understand what's going on. So this was kind of more of a new thing, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys.
Actually, I have been the primary author.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, Jesse has formatted, we've been trying to put it together. We have requested input from other committee members, but I have been the primary author.
Okay.
And as I said, in my mind, you need to say how you got there before you can consider what you're doing. So when we received Chaz's most updated version, I don't know if it's yet the final. Last week, it was, well, why is this here and not that? But we've just started those discussions. So it's not that we're not thinking about it. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we have a number of good questions from the committee that we're taking back. We plan to answer those questions on Thursday. Tomorrow. So progress is being made. I think some of the big core questions currently are: one, why isn't there more money for roads in here? Which is a policy question. And two, are you certain that if you structure an override this way, that is different than how we have previously structured it, that you take the 5.1 million at the start, all at the start, as opposed to phasing it in over time, and then use the delta from what you need and what you don't in year one to seed an override stabilization fund? Does that pencil out? And the answer to that question is yes. We've run the figures, and we want to talk about that tomorrow at the town subcommittee to discuss that. Yes, that pencils out. That gets us through FY29, and it keeps the overall amount of the override slightly lower than the amount that the town asked for in the 2023 override adjusted for inflation. So the talking points there are: this is, in real money terms, less than what we asked for last time. Not much less, but less. It will last us through 2029 if we take all of it up front and charge it out that way. And it's going to fund the basics that the town needs to provide the level of services that the community expects from us. That is, to keep going as we are now, and also to correct for things that the community wants us to correct for, like the fact that we have 6 vacant police officers, like the fact that we have this looming fire contract, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we are now.
Okay.
No, I'd like to add one comment.
Yes,
My
please.
greatest concern at this point is the timeline. There's a lot of work still. If you can see, there's a lot of gaps in the report, a lot of things missing, and just getting it all together. I think we have a February 20th target date, and I just want to kind of review that with the committee right now, because we're going to need that, I suspect, and more at this point.
Yeah, okay, that's the third item on the agenda. Do you want to jump to that now or go to Sergio's solar narrative report? I mean, I think Sergio's report is so straightforward that we can probably deal with it fairly quickly.
I think so too.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you would like to do, Bernard?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. To just get through that because it's something that we can say we've accomplished.
Okay. So very briefly, I believe most of you have sort of seen this in some form or one way or another along the way. New pieces here are I placed this executive summary at the beginning, which just sort of tries to wrap up everything. It tells you where it's funded from. It tells you in what amount. Tells you something about the potential for the federal ITC. Says something about trying to control the growth in electricity. Gives some cost benefit, which was one of the questions, Bernard, that you had asked me the other day, and I'm glad that you did. And then kind of a quick summary sentence, which that it seems to do both helping control the expenditure side of the budget and as a contributor to our carbon net zero. The only other item that I wanted to bring to your attention that's in here is that there was some lack of sort of clarity about the cost benefit information generally, and I've been able to combine that information into the report. We've seen this chart before, but it was a standalone document. So it's now in the report. And finally, the last comment that I wanted to make considered the question of the fact that the sustainability director is working on two tracks. One is the immediate first track, but I wanted to sort of highlight the second part of this, the tier 2, and that even there, the second tier is not intended to end at the current level of financing. So it's a reminder that as we continue, there are additional capital estimates that are needed and some sense about what they might do. And that eventually they have this kind of a potential to the operating budget when completed. So I really added this point that it's when fully funded offers us the clear opportunity to bring the electricity purchase portion of the budget to a near zero in a cost-effective manner. And that's it. So
Great, thank you.
are there any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
And if not, I'll move this.
Okay, so moved. Any seconds?
Second,
Okay. Let's vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Let me find the list. Let's start off with Dick Binka.
Aye.
Ruth Ellen Fisher's on here. Jeff Rudolph,
Yes.
Sergio Modigliani,
Yes.
Janet Gelbart,
Yes,
Thad F. Cosme,
yes.
John Doggart,
Yes.
and we don't have a school committee representative. So, okay, that passes.
Thank you, Serge. Thank you,
Good to hear.
Sergio.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Sergio.
Next, review revised full report outline. Um,
Yeah, so
Hmm.
I will take this one.
Okay.
There's still some gaps in the outline. I'm happy to share this. There's also in the same document, the schedule, which is at the end of that document. There haven't been material changes to that since last time we talked about it, so I'm not going to delve into that. Everybody can take a look at that independently. It does have a list of what we expect to share based on what we know right now in each of our subsequent full committee meetings. And so we just want to make sure that everything obviously gets through the process. I wanted to highlight a couple of things in this outline. The first is that there's still areas where we need somebody to own the section. So we do not currently have an owner to write the executive summary. The sort of roll up. The recommendation summary will be written by the different subcommittee chairs, but we need an owner for this to the extent that somebody's willing to raise their hand for it. Sergio, go ahead.
Well, I wasn't volunteering, but wanted to raise a question for all of us. Our committee name has two parts, expenditures and revenue. And I wondered whether, since in fact we have recommendations in both columns, if I can use that word, I thought we might want to have is that the report might want to be structured in those two component parts. It might be one way of thinking about how to organize the material for the reader. So we have a set of recommendations relating how we might better control expenditures, and we have another part of it which is really talking about potential for new revenue. Just an idea.
Yeah. That's good feedback. Are you suggesting that we do that on the summary side or in the full report?
I don't know whether it's a three chairs conversation and we just try to figure that out, or whether the committee may have thoughts. It occurred to me as I was writing up the futures report, and I organized ours that way. But it doesn't mean that the full report has to be that way, just an idea.
No, it's a good point. And on the school side, we similarly have it structured as I mean, things that take cost out or reduce cost, and then revenue.
Yeah, I mean, what do other people think about this as a document which we're trying to present to other people? Is that a useful way to present the information?
For what it's worth, I think it's a very useful way. I mean, it helps people sort of separate sometimes complicated data or information into,
Two
logical
buckets.
boxes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, presumably one would think that the first one would try for would be controlling expenditures, and the other would be to raise revenue, but not necessarily. But okay, yeah, good. So why don't we try that, Jesse? Maybe, and Sadaf and I can try to work on this outline with that thought.
Okay, that sounds good.
So back to you, Sadaf.
All right.
Interrupt.
Oh, no, that was helpful. So Sergio, we highlighted, this was based on the last discussion we had around this being lower priority, just given where we are and what else we have to cover. So why
We don't have the information, I think, is the real answer. So that should just come out. Why don't you take it out?
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm happy to take that out. And then I volunteered to do some of this background information around the structure of the committee, et cetera. That's fairly straightforward. There are sections in here that, based on your outline, Janet, I pulled. There's still some gaps in terms of ownership, so I want to call that out. We're going to need to identify owners
Can I go back a minute? The first part, the overall, Jesse has written a good piece of.
Okay, like the purpose.
To send you that. I didn't include it because it wasn't part of the town report.
Okay.
But I can send you that, and if you and Sergio are working on it, I'll send it to both of you. And then you can figure out, is this already done or do we need to do more work?
Okay. Well, and I thank you for that, Janet, because I do agree. I read Jesse's part of that. I thought he'd covered it pretty well, and it really addresses all three of the subcommittees. So it appears once someplace,
Yeah, I have it. I will send it to you both.
Very helpful. Thank
Word
you.
form tonight.
Thank
after we
you.
get home.
Okay, great. So these sections still need an owner, D. Although portions of this are covered. So I know Sergio, you wrote a section, you did some work on historic tax
Well,
increases.
there was a one pager that simply gave the history of the overrides,
Yep, that's
which I
right.
think is a simple,
Cut and
and I
paste.
think
It
there was
just leaves
general
the numbers
agreement that
modified.
Melissa checked it and the numbers looked right. So we
Okay.
have that.
All right, so Sergio will use your document for this. And then it was unclear to me. So Janet, what I did was I took your outline and I put in,
So that, I'm sorry, there's one correction. My document does not do anything other than give the amounts. The word impact, which would be presumed to be under an understanding of what it did to the tax rate or something like that. I do not have that data, but I believe Melissa does.
Actually, I thought Cliff, somewhere down in this document, at one point I was told Cliff and maybe Dick were working on it, because when I took my chart that just shows this is the composition of your increases over the last 5 years, Melissa said Cliff is working on this too. Make sure you're not overlapping. We had a brief sidebar when we were both here in person. So I think it's being done. I just didn't know if Cliff or Dick owned it. And what my chart shows in the town side is going back, I think, to 2018. This is how much your taxes have increased in total. This is due to what I call the base. This is what's due to overrides, and this is what's due to debt exclusions.
Yeah. I am working on a capacity to pay section for the full committee. It's not really a school subcommittee issue, and the increase in taxes on all of the classes of property, condos, 2-family, 3-family, single family, 4+, all of the residential classes of property, as reported by the assessor, will be included in that.
So Dick, does it make sense, because I actually have you here and I highlighted this because I added your name to it. So I wanted to make sure you were aware that this section.
When you say you added my name, oh, we're down there.
It's right. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
It's a little bit ahead, but since you mentioned this, since I knew that you were working on this document and I've seen a draft, I added your name to this line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we want to, we can combine these sections. But you know, some of this work is done, some of it lives in different places. Dick, you're covering portions of it, but if you're comfortable, it might make sense to bring these together and combine it in one section. They're certainly, you know.
Right. I'm not sure what Cliff is doing, and
Sergio has a document on the historic.
okay.
You've seen it, Dick. It simply does a summary starting from 2008 of the overrides that we've had and how much they were and how much was allotted in each fiscal year. That's all.
Right. And I think I've put that document also, or that summary in a document along the way. So yes.
All right, so maybe we combine these and then.
I like the idea of bringing those topics together. If other people agree.
You're confirming my part too. I had suggested to Sadaf in an email, since parts of what I've written she has in the overall, which was an issue that we had on the town side, since we had the info in the town, but it affected everybody. That maybe when all the subcommittee reports are done, when the full report is put together, you might be mix and matching, cutting and pasting, because it really doesn't matter where it came from. As Dick said, schools committee is working on something that's not really the schools. And that might be more efficient than trying to figure out now how it's going to be done when we don't know what all the pieces finally look like.
Okay, well, I think we had an outline based on that we came up with based on feedback from this group, that this is the information we think needs to be included in the report. A lot
Right.
of these are covered in your outline and in the document that I had seen, prior versions of it, that Jesse had shared. So that's why I have your name and Jesse's name on these, because it looks like you are already writing those sections, and this is a common section, right? The
No,
background section.
I'm not denying that. I'm saying, I'm trying to figure out how to merge different pieces together, that we're all writing our pieces as long as they're all assigned to anybody. How it looks in the final report is you can cut and paste those parts together. So if you want to put all the tax pieces together when you have them, we don't need to decide that now, as long as we know they're all covered.
I think that's fair. I just want to make sure they're all covered. That's my objective in this discussion. But I think we're on the same page. Okay, so I had given this section to Cliff, but I'm not sure if he's the right person to cover this, the town school partnership formula and approach, or Chaz, whether this is something that is better done by your team.
We can obviously, if this is gonna be a part of the formal report, I don't think you want staff writing it.
That's fair.
We're obviously happy to provide support. And I can talk to Cliff about this. I know, because he's been digging in as well to things like OPEBs and so forth. So I'll have a conversation with Cliff offline, and we can talk about how we want to put something in there about this.
Okay, that sounds good. So I'll reach out to him. He's not on this call, obviously, so I'll tackle that. The town budget summaries I structured similar to how we have the PSB summaries in Roman numeral 5. So there's the forecast summary, an override scenario, non-override scenario, cost drivers, efficiencies, revenue sources, and kind of an other bucket based on prior conversations that have come up. I know, Janet, you're in process of writing this, or this document is in flight. It might evolve, but we can continue to refine it. But this maps largely to how your document is already structured. And then this section, I think is still evolving based on what you said earlier, Janet. Is that fair? So I don't have information on this yet. I assume this section will be needed once you complete the work that you're undertaking right now.
This is what we're starting to work on now. Once we figure out, once we fully discuss the proposal, the cuts, override, non-override, all of that, then the subcommittee can discuss what do we think of it all. And that's what I think where we first are going now. We started that last week. Hopefully we'll get some more tomorrow.
Okay, great. These sections actually haven't changed on the school side, so I'm not going to go through these again, but this is the same as it was in the prior iteration. So this maps to our division of labor based on the work that the subcommittee has already done. And I don't think, Sergio, keep me honest here, I don't think that yours has been updated in the last week either. So this should be consistent with what everybody saw last time we reviewed this.
Yeah, can you scroll down a little bit so I can see all of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we can update that. We have more information in the futures report now.
Okay, great. And then the final thing, these sections are still open, but this section is called out. There are a couple things that came up last time. There's a question about some of the pieces that had come up, some of the issues that had come up in the context of a potentially revised financial model with the subcommittee that was assembled, I think in the spring or summer timeline, and then the work was paused. And so there's an open question about whether we can complete that work. I know that Melissa is heads down completing the budget book, but I'm hoping to connect with her hopefully by the end of this week. So that is kind of a TBD. And then I know, Bernard, specifically, you had asked about, just kind of scrolling up, around the CLA report follow-up. So
Yeah.
I know that there's been some work done on that by Chaz and Superintendent Wong, that, I think we need to just see how that is resolved to be able to agree on what goes into this section. But it came up, so I just wanted to call out that it is here in this document.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Sergio. Go ahead.
I had a question and a comment. The question was whether the school subcommittee believes that it would be useful to put the new MOU between the town and the schools in the document somewhere.
So that would be related to the CLA report.
It could be. I mean, it would be an outcome, exactly. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think we could put it in here as an appendix.
Okay. And then the other thing was that you went down to, you had this thing called other topics.
Yep.
Or something. I wanted to make the full committee aware that a new item has come before Futures, which will be discussed on Friday. We're not going to talk about it in detail here, but I wanted to let you know what it was. It is basically that an analysis of the electric bills of all of the town buildings has revealed that there's a component which is called a demand charge, which is applied to all bills based on the peak usage in every month. And there's a very well-known technology for controlling the peak demand and thereby reducing the bills, which our director of buildings, Charlie Simmons, has been working on. But there's some new technology which has been brought to our attention, which we'll discuss on Friday. So this is just a heads up. I don't know if it'll go anywhere yet, but just wanted to make you aware of it.
All right. Thank you, Sergio. All right. That's what I wanted to cover with this group with respect to this particular agenda topic. So thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, well, let's move on. Thank you, Sadaf. That was very, very helpful. Format and timing of any potential override. That's a discussion I assume that Chaz is going to help us with.
Sure. So I've got a number of requests from questions offline from folks about the timing of any potential override. Namely, do we have to do it this year? What happens if we don't do an override this year? And, you know, can we postpone it in some way? Is there some other way to get money to cover our operating costs for the course of this fiscal year and have a vote in, say, next May? And the proposals that I've seen for this are twofold. They fall into two categories. One is make cuts, or use one-time sources of revenue to paper over the gap between now and FY28, and then reverse those cuts. You know, either fold those cuts or the one-time funds into a future override, or address those in some way on the back end. And the second way would be to bond our pension obligations and pay down the obligations by paying a bond rather than making the direct payments, stretch out the time to satisfy our obligations, but this time it's under a bond as opposed to the directly. That basically pay off our pension obligations early, use the delta between what we would be paying in that and what we would then be paying in terms of interest and principal on the bond to cover our costs for at least one fiscal year, and then go from there. I see two, so I think both of these scenarios are problematic. The first is problematic because, one, if you make cuts, my general feeling on it, particularly if you make cuts, then the immediate response from people is, don't restore it. I think particularly of the COVID budget 2020, right? When it looked like things were going to be incredibly dire, we asked every department, please submit, if we had to cut your budget by 10%, what would you do? And they did. They submitted budget cuts of 10% to the then town administrator. We published that information. And then when the revenues came in and they were higher than expected, we said, we're okay, we're gonna roll back those cuts. And surprise, surprise, we were told, no, you're gonna make those cuts anyway. And that was very damaging to departmental operations. They prepared scarcity budgets to try and get us through COVID. And when it became clear that they weren't necessary, those cuts were taken anyway. And in many cases, as the town subcommittee is learning, they still haven't been restored. So when you make cuts, you have to be prepared for those cuts to be permanent. And given the damage to operations that we are looking at in a no override scenario, I wouldn't recommend that. With regards to the use of one-time funds to cover that gap, you're basically you're declaring a holiday for your existing fiscal policies. And again, not to beat a dead horse here, but the reason why the town has the bond rating it has is because we have strong fiscal policies and we follow them. Now, you could make an argument to the ratings agencies, this is an emergency, this is a one-time thing, it's never going to happen again. Once you open Pandora's box, it's very hard to close it. And the emergency that is being outlined here is not a financial emergency. It's not something that would allow us to say, raid the stability fund because revenues are coming in lower than expected. It's a political emergency. We don't think an override is going to pass. I don't think the rating agencies will look fondly on that. I really don't. I think they will look at that and say, okay, but a big portion of why we give you credit is because you follow these things. And when you need to have an override, you put it in front of the voters honestly, and they tend to vote for it. If you're telling us that's no longer true, I don't see why you're a AAA rated community. So I think trying to paper this over with funds we have, or by making cuts, would be a very dangerous outcome, would lead to dangerous outcomes. Bonding the pension is raises different concerns. One, most obviously, it creates an ongoing longer term liability for us. We are so close to fulfilling our outstanding obligations and settling those. We are grasping towards FY30, with a lot of hope. And if we package that back into debt and sell it out on the market, we're extending out the timeline for repayment. And in a meaningful way, right? In order for this to generate the kind of delta between what we're paying now and what we would be paying on the bonds in order to make it worth our while, and cover these gaps, you're talking about, I don't know, like in 20 years, 30 years, you're creating another long-term obligation that's going to be difficult to retire. The good thing about pension obligation bonds is that in a low interest rate environment, you're buying yourself stability and you're locking in a low rate, so that you're not subject to market pressures. What you see is what you get. You will be paying this amount of interest on this bond from here on out. And it's nice to have that certainty, particularly if you don't know how long, if you have a long way to go before your pension obligations are retired. The town actually considered doing this in 2003. It was ultimately referred to a select board committee, and the select board committee recommended against it. Even back in 2003, when our obligations were nowhere near being satisfied. Because the downside is, right, you're locked into that. What happens if interest rates go up? Return on interest goes up. The investments that we're making in this environment mean we could pay off this obligation sooner. But meanwhile, you're locked into this space where you're paying off a set bond with principal and interest, and you're not able to pay those off early. In fact, you would be penalized if you tried to pay those off early. So you're trading some risk for a longer term, more clear horizon in terms of the payments that you're making. But I think if you were to do that now, you would be kind of mortgaging the future. You would be locking the town into another 20 or 30 years of long-term obligations. And I think we would ultimately come to regret it, especially if that was only to fulfill the need to bridge ourselves 1 year, 2 years, however many years we think we could get out. Because then ultimately we'd be in the same place, right? Ultimately, we would wind up in a space where our expenditures, our revenues were not meeting the growth in expenditures and costs. And we wouldn't have the pension satisfaction to look forward to. We'd have instead a long horizon of debt to fulfill. And so I think when it comes down to it, in a lot of ways, and this is hard to say, from my perspective, I would appreciate the certainty of a no vote more than I would a delay. I think a delay will cause lasting damage to the town's financial reputation, and may not get you what you need anyway. You're not guaranteeing yourself a yes vote in 28 by delaying in 27. The no vote makes the priorities of the community very clear. This is a bridge too far. We're not going to do this. Okay. We will make the cuts necessary. They will be draconian on the town side. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but at least I know, at least I know what the community wants. I will say that if that is I will say that I am facing increasing pressure from my departments to sever the town side of the override from the school side of the override. I am facing increasing pressure in the event that we are using this as a barometer of what the community wants, for there to be a clear vote. Well, do you want municipal services? Do you want school services? Do you want both? I am not there yet. I continue to think that we are intertwined, the town and schools, and we should not be putting those separate questions on the ballot. But I want a name for this committee that sentiment is out there and it is growing. That there is a desire among town staff to separate ourselves from the schools in this regard and let the schools take their own chances. I don't think that's a good idea right now. But when it comes to the structure of the override, that is the feedback that I'm getting. And so I think in terms of the structure of this, I don't think you should wait, but I think you should make decisions as soon as possible on what the top line number of the override is. It's my understanding that the schools will be able to provide that as early as tomorrow night, what their initial ask is, depending on how the finance committee goes. And then we should decide. You should decide on the structure, whether it makes sense to put it on the levy all at once, as the town is suggesting, and whether or not it should be separated out, whether or not there should be tiered questions. Do you want to vote for X amount plus Y amount, et cetera? And I think those decisions really need to be made as soon as possible so that we can have clarity. And I can, frankly, go back to my team and say the recommendation has been made. We either are hanging together or we aren't. So you have your marching orders. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So that.
Yeah, I want to be clear. So thank you for clarifying about the school timeline, because that was going to be one of my questions as well. So if we have more information, Mara, that'll be good. There has been feedback that I've heard from the community, and again, this is anecdotal because these are conversations that I'm having, but just for the benefit of the group, that people do think that a tiered structure for the override will be more palatable to voters. I think it gives people choices. And then it gives, people an opportunity to, to have a say and possibly vote something down, but without risking the overall override. I know, Chaz, that you and the town departments have put thought into this and arrived at a different conclusion. And I think it might be worth sharing a little bit more about why. We can do that now, or we can do that at a subsequent meeting when we dig into this further. So far, obviously, we've been missing the information from the school side to have a meaningful discussion on what the override might look like, how we would lump it together or not, and how we might package it, or recommend that we package it. Obviously, ultimately, the decision is up to the select board. Thank you.
Sergio?
Well, I didn't know, Chaz, did you want to respond first to Sadat?
Maybe just quickly. I think it's important to think about the two different things that we're talking about here. The town's proposal is that we we increase the levy all at once in the first year rather than spreading the levy increase out. A tiered override, as I understand it, that model is more, question 1A is, do you approve $10 million? Question 1B is, do you approve $15 million? The problem I see there is, I don't know how I would structure a town tiered override given our needs. One way you might do it is to use Dick's report, for example, and say, here's 1A, here's 1B. But for the reasons we discussed, I don't know if that's a good idea. I would have a hard time separating out. There's so little that I could think of that would go in 1B on the town side that I worry that might be kind of insulting to voters. Like, you could vote for, on the town side, 1A is 4.8 million and 1B is 5.3 million. They're kind of saying that's not really a choice at all. So I worry there. But again, I think it depends on where the schools come back with. But I will say, just based on the numbers and the financial plan and the school's financial plan, which you have in your packet and you all can review, I think they're going to have the same problem, which is they're so deep in the hole. I don't think there's going to be anything optional to put on top of the tier. I think you're just going to have a ugly kind of straight vote.
Thank you.
So if
yes,
I
would
might,
you-
if I may, I wanted to speak a minute to Chaz's prior comments, which I find myself very much in general in agreement with. I do not think it's a good idea to postpone. And for the reasons I think Chaz has articulated, important to let the voters get involved here, up or down, and to, in that sense, get a read of the room and then act accordingly. So I'm very much in agreement there. On the question of tiered, the town in its prior overrides, and Dick, you can refresh my memory if I'm speaking here, or Janet, or others of the old timers, so to speak. But there was a kind of an understanding that while the wording didn't appear on the ballot, there was an understanding about how the funds were going to be utilized. And it was a quite detailed, sort of a, for lack of a better word, a memorandum of agreement between the voters and the select board that if you support this, then this is how it gets spent. And then the more, I would say, defined approach in using the word tiered is that it may not be tiered by amounts, but it might indeed be tiered, as Chaz was suggesting, he's hearing from his own staff, between the town side and the school side. So, and I think that's still an evolving target, as Chaz is suggesting, and until we get those numbers, we probably can't talk a lot more about exactly how that might work. I did want to ask one question that I did not quite understand. When you, earlier, Chaz, in your comments, you referenced the question of OPEB bonding. Did that come to you from some member of this committee as a question?
No, it came from other sources. Although I think,
Okay.
I think ultimately it was pension bonding. I don't think bonding our OPEBs would get us what we need.
Pension bonding. Oh, I see. Okay.
Pension obligation bonds.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I think basically what you said is correct, and I would agree with it. I would only comment that the length of the term, and this is something Lincoln could address, need not be 20 years. It could be much shorter. And I'm also aware that at some premium, you can actually get bonds that you're allowed to prepay, that is, pay off prior to maturity. And I want to be clear, I'm not going down this route. I don't really want to engage in it because I don't think it's a good idea, but I was trying to make sure that we had the information accurately. Thank you.
So this is Bernard, if I may.
Yeah.
This kid. So we're in the process of getting the answers to those questions. And so we'll make sure that we have those questions when they're
Good enough.
to those questions when they're answered. If
And I want to be, as I say, I believe that your direction is correct, that this is not a path that has any really particularly attractive route, particularly because the arbitrage play that we would have is, sort of questionable at this point, unlike some communities where they were lucky enough to have borrowed heavily at very low rates. And that has turned out to be a very good play, but we're not in that. It's not that water is over the dam. Thank you.
By the way, unless we issue taxable bonds, where we wouldn't have that problem, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. John?
Yes, thanks. I want to start by first of all acknowledging that I requested some information which actually is already available, and I suppose I should have known that. If people want to know what the current, best guess as to the baseline, excuse me, percent increase over the next 3 years, if we are talking about a 3-year override baseline without the override, there are numbers in the long range financial plan. Melissa, thank you very much. And somebody mentioned it's 5.1, for FY27, but then it goes to 3.1 and 3.1 in 28 and 29. And that's without, there being any override. So, we'd be asking the voters to add another, I don't know, 1.5 to 2, no, excuse me, 1 to 1.5% maybe to each of those 3.1s. But Melissa probably knows, well, I'm sure knows that number better than I do. But the other two ideas, and I don't put these out there casually. I'm quite serious about these questions. 2 scenarios for how to handle an override. One is the 1-year override scenario. If we're going to tell people there are things we need to do, which we need time to do them to get some costs under control, like getting this, insurance cost under control. So we're going to work on that. But we at least need to get through another year, before we make any progress on working on those things. So, should there be some thought given to a 1-year override as opposed to a 3-year? And that brings the number down, and it makes it more likely that it will pass. Excuse me. But then the other idea is, should we introduce into the override discussion the concept of uncontrollable fixed costs and controllable fixed costs, sort of quotes around fixed costs? In a sense, all of these issues that we talk about in terms of the personnel costs, the insurance, the pensions, and so on, they are somewhat controllable depending on what we agree to under contracts. What's not controllable is when you get, slapped with a 10% or 15% increase in the rate of the, insurance plans that you're using to cover your insurance for your employees. What you agree to as a portion of that is controllable, but, the rate increase itself from the insurer is not so much controllable. Electricity, there's obviously an element of that is not controllable within the costs of doing street repairs and repaving. Materials costs sometimes go up faster than 2.5%. So if you sort of figured out what are the controllable fixed costs, what are the uncontrollable fixed costs, and then basically limited your override to uncontrollable fixed costs, maybe that would make the override more saleable, and maybe it would make it more understandable to people in a way that they accept. It's hard for people to accept the idea that we can't control the contracts we're negotiating with employees, but I think it is possible for them to understand we can't control when the cost of, asphalt goes up or the cost of electricity goes up.
Yes. Is that Janet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have trouble with understanding the concept more for what I know least about, which is the hole on the school side, because I haven't poked my nose in. But if 85% of our cost is in salaries, then I'm assuming on the school side, it means cutting a lot of staff. And you can't recover from that, even if the funds were available. you let go a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of services don't happen, even on the town side. How do you recover from that? How would someone want to come back and work for you under that kind of scenario? I disagree also with the bond stuff. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me when you're that close to the goal line to push the goal line back out. On the town side, as Chaz said, almost everything is in that year one. So one question I have is that true on the school side, or will they be looking for, I need X million now and X million again and X million again? That's one question. The other question I have is we're talking about salvation in 2030, but 2030, that pension thing begins to dip. It doesn't really come down to lots of usable money till 2031. So I would like some understanding of that. I mean, I think the things I've heard, the things we've talked about make sense, but unless the school side is, we have to understand if they're going to need money 2007, 2008, 2020, sorry, I left out the 20s, 9, but on the town side, it doesn't work because you're either going to lay off those police officers or you're not going to be able to fund what you've already agreed to. What John is proposing makes a lot of sense, maybe going forward. Maybe when the school committee is finished their negotiations with the teachers now, they'll be able to corral it. But a lot of stuff on the town side, it's already there. The big push is not what is anticipated for the current negotiations for the 5 other unions. The big push is already there from police and from fire. If you don't fund the overtime, you're going to have to start closing companies. I don't understand all the technical words, so correct me if I'm using the wrong ones.
Yeah.
In 2015, we had an extension because we weren't meeting the deadline, but that was because we were only looking at how do we replenish or add to what the schools have, not in their classrooms, but in order to get the right number of classrooms, they weren't hiring social workers and psychologists and nurses and all those other things we expect them to have. So it was easy to say we can get by another year without it. And the town administrator, as I recall it, health insurance went down and the town administrator was able to say to the schools, this will bail you out for where you are right now. I don't think we can postpone it. I agree with Chaz. You know, it's time to find out what the voters want. I myself have talked about to myself and may have mentioned to other people, maybe we should separate the town and the schools, because in the circles I move in, there's almost anger. If you look at those override history, most of the money has been to the schools. People don't understand, no matter how many times I tell them, but you built a school, but that's what's driving it. You can't take that back. And this has nothing to do with a bridle path and a swimming pool and a skating rink, because we're not talking about that budget. And they'll understand it for about 5 minutes, because then they come back again with the same question. And there's anger that it's all gone to the schools. And I can't get this, and I don't have that. My roads aren't paved, I fall. The streets aren't cleaned as much as they used to be. I even asked this question. Charlie assured me, no, snow removal is the same. I will tell you, the streets that I'm on, the intersections are messy, and I used to be able to walk across the street. Road itself is good. Intersections are a mess. They can't come back a second time. That is what I assume. So pushing the can down the road, that's how we got this mess to begin with. We kept denying that we had to come to terms with the fact that this is how much revenue we have, and this is where our expenses are going. It's not a new question. So I would be, you know, other than the question of are the schools going to need X, or is it like the town where you can just grab it all at once?
Janet,
I apologize. I have to drop for something else. But I don't think that we fully talked about the 1 year override piece. This is something that had been raised, and sorry to interrupt you, Sergio, but I just want to chime
no,
in.
that's exactly the question I wanted to ask
Okay.
you.
I think this is worth discussing. I wish I could stay to be part of this conversation. It came up earlier in this process, and I think at the time, and we weren't ready to talk about it at the time, but I think it is something that needs to be discussed and discussed further. So I just wanted to chime in on that. Thank you, everybody. Apologies.
Thanks,
Thank you.
So Janet, when you began speaking and you were referring to John Van Scoyak's comments, I wasn't clear. Are you suggesting that the 1 year, it's clear that you want an override. I think we got that. But are you suggesting that the 1 year is something you think might be worth considering or not?
I'm not sure what's meant by 1 year. And is it meaning that we think we can have an override for X amount and then we'll come back again and finish the rest? I don't think that's gonna work. I don't know personally so I struggle with myself because the amounts are so big. And I've been very immersed in the amount of blood on the town side. And I anticipate it ain't easy on the school side. I hear, but I don't know how you do a 1 year override. And I don't know, as Chaz said, how you make what the town needs come in a little bit at a time over 3 years, because the numbers just don't add up.
Well, I mean, here's how I'd understand a 1 year, and I'm not advocating it, but I do think it's good to talk about.
Yeah, no, explain it
Yeah,
to me.
so as I understood the 1 year idea, it was from the town, I think basically it's all of it. That's how I would think about it.
It's
because
basically what?
It's all of the
Yes.
town.
Hmm.
Right, and for the schools, it would be, call it a maintenance budget. Would allow them to continue more or less in a status quo kind of an idea. So that's how you might frame it. And then I think the argument would have to be that there is very significant material new information that's expected during this 12-month interval, which would then allow a more informed, longer range override proposal to be again placed on the ballot.
So you would say the schools get X amount now, which I understand is still pretty high, and then give them time to work further on what they've started to do, and then come back again in 28 and.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, there may be new information. The collective bargaining may have been resolved. So there may be some better understanding. Again, I'm not advocating for this, but I was just trying to engage with the idea to understand how one might think about doing it.
Yeah, I
And
hear
John
you.
maybe should speak to it because I think you raised it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to actually add a thought. Thank you very much for the invitation. I mean, one of the advantages, in addition to what I already mentioned, that I see in this is that by asking for a 3-year override, it's almost as though we're saying, folks, we've tried really hard not to have to ask you for this. And we know that there are certain things we've identified in our report that we're going to need to work on so that we hopefully can dial back how much we ask for in future years. But give us 3 years to figure that out before we ask you again. And I think maybe a person might be willing to give you a year at a time and then expect to see some progress before giving you another year and another year and another year. But when we basically say we need this much money for 3 years because we don't think we're going to solve any of these problems, at least in the next 3 years, that's kind of a big ask and a big expectation that people will kind of buy into the notion that we've identified a problem that's structural, And because it's structural, we need the money, not just for this year, but for the next year and the year after that, as though we're not going to make any progress in solving it next year or the year after that.
Well, John, my response to that is the following. I don't know where you guys are, but this isn't going away. And there is nothing that we have in our quiver of arrows or suggestions, if I can use that term, that'll make it go away. Even if everything that we had, in mind, I still don't think it would get us there.
Well, how about dialing back on how much we, push for in terms of settlements of contracts?
But that's,
That's the big one.
Easier said than done.
I understand that, but I think I am reasonably convinced that there will be it has to be a quid pro quo. And it's not going to happen with no quo. So, and mind you, it's not that I don't believe that that's an important area that we need to keep focus on. We do. But I wonder whether the 1 year is kind of a false promise. Is if we were going to come back and really fix it. I don't know. Maybe others have thoughts.
Bernard,
Yeah,
see me here?
I'm sorry, Janet. You're such a small person in my screen. I can't see you.
I'm the only person in the room, and so I will shout out if you don't notice me.
Yeah,
please
interrupt.
do.
I'm where Sergio is, and I think John is mistaken in focusing just on salary contracts. At least on the town side, the contracts reached with the unions that are now in negotiation, where it's not already a done deal, have been around that 3% a year. Now they're going to fight real hard for more because everyone else got so much more. And that was the concern. And what I hear about the teachers, that with unions, the first one gets, and then the others sort of try to play copycat. And Chaz has already said he's heard that teachers unions want their own arbitration panel. And I don't know how much of the ask on the school side would be related to that bargaining reserve, because it's not, the only thing that's in the budget is what we've already agreed to and what reserves we're able to put aside for what we think is coming. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think focusing on that, yes, we need to make sure and keep bargaining as hard as we can to keep that salary level, not going up so much. But that's not, we're one side of the negotiation. And I don't think we're Donald Trump, who thinks he's both sides. And employees have their own responses to inflation. So it's not like, they can just say, okay, we're doing great. And I really, from what I hear, it's going to be hard to get people to say yes now. I don't think say yes, and we'll be back again next year for more is going to play well. But I agree with Sadat. Maybe we should table this for now, and unless someone to jump in.
It would be also good to have some of our other members present. I'm sure that
especially from the school side. Val is on the phone. But until we see their numbers, we don't know what we're talking about in total. We know, it's going to be high. That's the extent of my knowledge, is that it's going to be a lot of money.
So we have FY27 now, right? I know based on from the school's budget book where the schools are coming out in FY27. The gap, and this is preliminary, so this could change tomorrow night. My understanding now is that their gap is around $6.36 billion for year one. The town's gap in year one is, so the town, what the town would need to be spending in year one with the knowledge. Just put aside all the thoughts about the reserve and so forth, because that does alter the calculus somewhat, is around 3.8. So you're already in the $10 million range. And if you were to do what Sergio suggested, which is put all 3 years of the town in at 5.31, which, you know, if you were to consider that, I think that's probably the right call because it saves you money in the long run. That puts you at around 11.6. So 1 year override, 11.6. With the possibility of the schools coming back. I don't know. But at least you have numbers. At least that it's something more concrete.
Okay, Jeff?
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Bernard. Just a couple quick thoughts. I absolutely agree that I think we should have this discussion with as many of our fellow committee members because it's so crucial. I think John makes a great point in, you know, hey, if we've had some troubles on the school side, let's do a 1 year with the idea that we can see some improvements, next year and go from there. But I also agree that I don't know if we're really ready to be doing yearly overrides. I'm not sure how well that would play, and that may essentially mean we're really just doing a 1 year sort of bridgey type thing, and then who knows, right? To a little bit to Janet's point, with if we let firefighters or police officers go, like that's a big deal. I think the same plays on the school side, right? If we put together an override that fails, we're going to lose teachers as well as police officers, and the same sort of thing happens. So I think it's very important for us, and I realize again that it's not our place to put the ballot measure on the ballot. That's solely in the hands of the select board. It's so critical for us to at least consider what would happen if we have a very large override and it fails. And if we all discuss and agree that, hey, we've gotten to this point, we need to let the voters decide, and we go into this eyes wide open, then we go into it eyes wide open. I just want to make sure that everybody on the committee has a chance to give their opinion, because there's some things that once we pass them, we can't go back, So just wanted to throw that out there, and I definitely think we should have more discussion on this before we make that recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
So it sounds
Okay.
like we're going to push this to next week in hope that we will have a larger contingency. I'm curious, Dick, you haven't said anything about this question, and it's hard to believe you don't have a perspective.
Oh, you better believe it.
Okay.
No, I think the discussion is premature. I may have missed them, but I don't think I've seen any definitive school numbers for fiscal year 28 or 29.
So
is that correct, Chaz?
just to remind everybody, back in December, Superintendent Wong did address the school committee and gave percentage increases in the out years. And she did some of that again last week. So, we have some idea that this is not going away.
No, I understand that. Chaz, you reported a 6.36 in fiscal 27.
Yeah.
For the schools.
Yes.
Do you have numbers for 28, 29?
Not good ones yet. The piece that they were waiting on, right, is, so we've been waiting on the schools for a while. They're now in a space where they've got a sense of where their expenditures are going to be if they make the cuts they're proposing in FY27, play that out in 28, 29. So they've got that. What they didn't know was what are whether or not the revenue estimates on the towns overall will be revised going through the town school split based on the policy recommendations we on staff would be making to the advisory committee and the select board in the budget book on Friday. And what we are saying to them, the recommendation we're going to make, and that the advisory committee and select board would need to accept this, would be to hold the shifts in policy stable. That is to reduce the revenue funded CIP back down to 6% for the course of this override period, and to hold OPEB funding level, not increase it by $250,000 every year for the pendency of this override period. It's a hard choice, but given the numbers that we're dealing with, it seems like a rational choice. So now that the schools have that and have a sense of what the running through the split, what their revised revenue allocation is going to be, they should be able to calculate the delta between where their revenues will be and where their expenditures will, their revised expenditures will be. And I would hope that they'll have that discussion on Thursday or soon thereafter. And that basically, I would hope, forms the top line number for discussion of an override, right? Those are your three deltas. That's where the schools are. And then we go through the same sort of exercise that's now being gone through on the town side. You know, what is that coming from? What's being done? You know, what is the capacity of the community to pay? Where do we wind up?
How
Okay,
did you get from
and could
the 8.1 million to the 636 million?
So the 8.1 million does not take into account the CIP reduction, the OPEB reduction, the OPEB contribution stay flat, or the additional revenue that we anticipate from fees and fines that run through the split.
Okay.
So after all that,
I was just trying to clarify that.
yeah,
That we
gets you
last
down.
heard the 8.1 from the
Right,
superintendent.
and
right.
could you help?
Who's on the downside? Get you down further.
Okay,
Could you,
thank you.
could you help me on another point, Chaz?
Sure.
The 6 point, let's just take fiscal year 27, 6.36 schools and 3.8 million town. Does that include the costs, for example, health insurance that are not directly allocated? Or are those additional increases?
No, those are wrapped in. Those are included.
So that 10.16 would be an all-in number at this point?
Yes, for 1 year.
Okay.
Chaz, does that cover the looming bulge in the fire contract?
No,
So then in 28, we know we have a commitment for $900,000.
yes,
If I remember the number right.
correct. $910,000.
Yeah, and
And the sustainability division and some of the
Right.
licenses from IT that are expiring.
and some of those things save us money in the long run, which we know we've lived through with the roads by not paying attention. It costs more, both because costs of materials have gone up, but also because the roads have deteriorated more. And sustainability impacts, I believe, in the out years, it would impact Sergio's solar energy thing, because we couldn't get beyond what we have right now.
Yeah.
And economic development, which everybody claims is the savior, but I don't think we have any saviors other than the release of all that pension money, which should never be done all at once, right away.
Correct.
Because if you took all that pension money and you put it in OPEBs in 4 years or whatever, when you finished OPEBs, you'd still have that big bulge, and you need to be planning for
Yep.
how to use it.
Correct.
So yeah, we are in a deep hole, and it's a matter of if we wanna face the music now and see what the voters say, or kick the can down the road, which is what we've been doing since we've identified the structural deficit.
I don't know that we've identified it. It's been a regrettable decision that really happened many, many years ago. And we're just living with the consequences, and it just gets worse. That's all. The lines are diverging. That's the real problem.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's not that they're in parallel and apart. They're getting farther apart.
Right.
I mean, and that's the definition of what's not sustainable, I think.
Yeah, it's just,
And I think, we try very hard to educate folks on that and talk about, for example, right, the fact that in real terms, the amount of money that the state gives us has gone down, and all of that stuff. It's hard out there for municipalities. We have faced a lot of hard choices.
I do think that Jeff's comment, and I think mentioned by others as well, is that we should really drop the topic for today.
Right.
That we're missing information and we're missing members, both of
Yeah.
which are critical.
Okay.
Okay, so let's drop it. Anything else to discuss in this area? If not, let's end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.